Hello, you're on Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. We've met Anne Groffilet, an anthropologist who has literally made her way through a fabric weft in the African textile universe. Recognized specialist in this field, she tells us about her career and the heritage of these exceptional pieces.
I want to work with textiles as a way of understanding the relationship between Europe and Africa and all this potential, all this richness and this cultural diversity.
What if importing food is not inevitable in Africa? A young Cameroonian entrepreneur tries the bet with broths and pasta made in Cameroon.
Soon I'll be preparing powdered onion. All of this is possible using locally available produce that will enable us to compete with European producers. I've studied their methods and I'm ready to take up the challenge with our own homegrown ingredients.
How to protect traditional African fabrics. West Africa is at the heart of pirate lust and trafficking.
People still come here, but I must say it is more difficult now because they have an alternative. Times are tough and people will go for the cheaper option.
In this first report, I'm taking you to Yaoundé to visit this small company which offers 5 varieties of broths and ready-to-eat pasta, an original initiative and 100% local production that is increasingly appealing to consumers, as our journalist Aboubakar Munchili found out.
This product, placed on prominent display in a Yaoundé supermarket, is not an import, unlike 99% of the other goods on sale here. The groundnut bouillon and oil on promotion are pure Cameroonian products. They are the first steps of a campaign to promote items made in Cameroon. The bouillon is produced in the workshops of Tanti, a company that is now a household name in Cameroon. Tanti is the brainchild of Thierry Niamen, a university graduate who couldn't resist a challenge.
I spent 7 years in the Soviet Union without a taste of the good old groundnut paste that I liked so much. My first disappointment came when I asked my mother to send me some. She grew the groundnuts, but when she got to the mill, there'd been a power cut. I had a friend waiting at the airport, so he turned up without the paste that I had been waiting so long for. I asked my mother if there wasn't anyone in Cameroon who could make ready-to-use groundnuts. My second disappointment came on the job front. I sent 750 applications to get work back home. Nobody replied. I was first in my year, but what could I do? I decided to take the bull by the horns and set up my own business.
With a doctorate in agricultural engineering, he set about designing his own machine to produce powdered groundnuts and oil. The company was founded in 1999 and production soon got underway. Although it wasn't an immediate success, Thierry Niamen didn't give in and decided to branch out, producing bouillon and pre-cooked food pastes made from groundnuts, soya and corn. 4 years after launching his business, he was awarded the Palme d'Or for the best food processing project in Cameroon. The Tanti brand was now a reference, especially for working women like the student we spoke to in a supermarket.
I'm a student now, so I don't have much free time. It takes time soaking the maize, changing the water and crushing it. It's too complicated. I'd rather buy the tennis soups because they only take 15 minutes to prepare.
We wanted to find out more about the process, but weren't allowed to film inside the factory. For reasons of professional secrecy, we were told. What we were told, however, was that the basic ingredients are sorted to eliminate debris before being roasted to destroy any toxic substances. Once the indigestible fibers have been removed, the grinds can be put into packets. According to the managers, the quality control is extremely strict, and the various pastes, powders and oils manufactured here are even submitted to the Pasteur Institute for tests. Motivated by the success of his first products, Thierry Niamen dreamt up new recipes using local produce to satisfy growing demand and changes in Cameroonian society.
Soon I'll be preparing powdered onion. All of this is possible using locally available produce that will enable us to compete with European producers. I've studied their methods and I'm ready to take up the challenge with our own homegrown ingredients.
The company has taken on new staff, which is particularly good news in a country with sky-high youth unemployment. The factory alone employs 50 or so people sorting, roasting and packing the produce. Tanti also has an army of delivery men supplying supermarkets and stores in Yaoundé, as well as regions further afield. Small-scale producers of ground nuts, soya and corn are also benefiting from the runaway success of the Tanti sachets. They have had to modify their production methods to provide the quantity and quality of products the factory requires. Other related jobs are being created to guarantee the link between the producers and the principal client. This economic dynamism has had a positive effect on the country's inhabitants, who now sense that the dependency of foodstuffs imported from the north is not eternal.
If we get support from NGOs and the government to really get production going, we should be able to cope very easily without depending on anyone.
One day, this modest factory may well give rise to an ultra-modern installation in line with international norms. Meanwhile, this company leader intends to become a trailblazer in Central Africa. And who knows, maybe across sub-Saharan Africa too. He has the right ingredients, the right stuff. Watch this space.
As I mentioned earlier, our guest today has been living for years in the fascinating world of African textiles. It was in Burkina Faso, when she was a high school student, that she discovered the diversity of these fabrics in the 1980s. The young girl has now become a recognized anthropologist specialized in African textiles and curator of an exhibition currently devoted to them in Jouy-en-Josas, in the Paris region. Laurent Soustresse and Thierry Schiller-Matte.
Anne Grosfillet, vous êtes l'une des
You are one of the curators of this exhibition devoted to African fabrics. Tell us about these exhibits. Where do they come from and what stories do they tell?
Alors dans cette exposition,
So in this exhibition we wanted to present the diversity of the know-how of the African continent. That is to say that you will discover pieces from North Africa to South Africa, from West Africa to East Africa, while not forgetting, of course, the cultures of Central Africa. It's a presentation of the different types of savoir-faire, of the materials, fibers, from tree bark to raffia, vegetable dyes such as henna or indigo, exploring dyeing also through chemical dyes and basin work, and then weaving by men and women and the excellence of embroidery and beadwork techniques. It's also a way of recounting the links and exchanges between African cultures and African people with the rest of the world, be it European industries or Asian cultures.
You are an anthropologist, a specialist in these textiles. When was the first contact that you had, the trigger, with these exceptional pieces of textile?
The first time I went to Africa, I was quite young. I was 11, and I went with my parents and my sisters to visit my uncle who lived in Togo at the time, and it was in 1984, the golden age of the Nana Benz. So I saw the African fabric called wax everywhere. I had also seen the weavers for the first time with a small strip work, but as it was my first trip to Africa, I felt like it was normal and everything was African. A few years later in high school, I was corresponding with a young girl from Burkina Faso, whom I went to visit on my own, and I wanted to bring back from my trip some local fabrics, and I told her, I would like to buy fabrics from Burkina Faso, things like what you wear. She said to me, but what we wear, we're lucky to be able to buy wax fabrics from Holland and England. For me, it was African fabric, and she said to me, no, it may be for Africa, especially for African markets, but it is produced in Europe. So that was a big trigger for me. I still managed to buy fabrics produced on the spot and to discover, of course, that they had a very rich craftsmanship and also local printing industries. But this is really where it clicked for me. I said to myself, I want to work with textiles as a way of understanding the relationship between Europe and Africa and all of this, all this potential, all this richness and this cultural diversity. Since there, I was in Burkina Faso, mossy setting, and no longer in this trivializing global vision of Africa as a whole. So that was really an awakening to its particularisms and its individual wealth, and this wonder of discovering the diversity of the continent.
By a sort of family coincidence, you then crossed the English Channel and found yourself in Manchester, which was at the time an important textile centre. And that's how you came back to African textiles. Tell us what happened.
J'ai suivi effectivement mon conjoint en Angleterre.
I actually followed my partner to England. He wanted to go to live in Great Britain.
En Grande-Bretagne, et j'ai choisi la ville de Manchester qui était à l'époque.
And I chose the city of Manchester, which was at the time a great centre for wax, and it was a very great discovery to understand how European industrialists can project what will make something African, what will appeal to Africans and to the various markets. And I have indeed seen that there's a great deal of subtlety. I mean that African markets are extremely demanding, as seen above in the exhibition.
Exigeant, comme on le voit en haut dans l'exposition.
The same design can be adapted into about 60 color variants with cracks, with layers, and each community is going to have a requirement regarding a codification of colors because it has a meaning. The fabrics that one will wear for a birth, for a wedding, for a bereavement, when one is young, when one is a married woman, when one belongs to this or to that group. For example, in Nigeria, there is the Igbo group who like very much red and yellow.
Qui aime beaucoup le rouge et le jaune. En Côte d'Ivoire, on a eu le bleu.
In Côte d'Ivoire, there is blue and orange. In the Sahel, yellow and turquoise. And then, for a bereavement, it will be red and black. The loincloths, to thank God, there will be a white background with an indigo base. So while wax is often seen as a large entity, there are in fact some very strong subtleties. And when talking with immigrant Ghanaian and Nigerian women, asking them why they wear this fabric made in Manchester, they wear it in Manchester to highlight an African identity. They said to me, yes, but we also wear our indigo, we also wear our weavings. We have a very rich craftsmanship, and they opened their wardrobe for me and I discovered an incredible wealth and diversity. I was fortunate thereafter to receive a grant from the French National Centre for Scientific Research, which financed me for an enormous fieldwork spanning 5 countries, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, Ghana, Burkina Faso and Mali. Thus, French-speaking and English-speaking countries, coastal and Sahelian zones, which really allowed me to understand this diversity of their savoir-faire and to understand that artisanal craftsmanship is complementary to industry. And that there is not such a strong opposition between the two. In the end, they must be understood as a whole in order to understand the challenges of textiles in general.
Les enjeux du textile.
You are on Initiative Africa. Welcome back to the second part of our show. Making delicate fabrics which have shaped a whole section of the continent's craftsmanship, it's an ancestral know-how, but not safe from counterfeiting, which is looming over the African textile sector. It must be said that for customers, the savings made on these counterfeited pieces are sometimes very tempting. But in the end, it is economies of the continent that are at stake. The legislation tries to crack down on fraud, yet the fight is difficult, as our journalist in Togo observed.
In Africa, the market for pirate copies of goods, from computers to car parts and masks to medicine, has never been so profitable. Now even the famous traditional pagné, so dear to the continent's women, is faked. We went to the capital of the pagné to find out more. Lomé, the capital of Togo, built its reputation on its splendid traditional tissues. Now even Lomé has been invaded by the tissue of lies. The unscrupulous counterfeiters copy classic designs for their low-quality cloth. On the first wash, these tissues lose their color, and the wearer often ends up with colored stains. The Nanas Benz, the famed cloth makers who got their name for their fondness for their Mercedes cars, made a fortune selling their wax tissue designs in the 1980s. Once they set fashion trends across Africa. Now their monopoly is gone. Some people now import fakes, while others still swear by the quality of their original pagnes, made by Velisco, owner of Superwax.
People still come here, but I must say it is more difficult now because they have an alternative. Times are tough, and people will go for the cheaper option, although, as I said, the tissue is poor quality and not made to last.
An original Pagné will cost an average of $125. A counterfeit copy sells for just $21, 1/6 of the price. It is becoming increasingly difficult to get by. Little wonder Africans are tempted to buy elsewhere. But cheap comes at a cost, just like fake medicines that can poison the patient and cosmetics that can burn the wearer's skin. The dyes and cloth used to make fake tissues can contain toxic chemicals.
Au niveau sanitaire, en prenant seulement les médicaments, contrefaits les médicaments illicites,
in health terms, we have seen counterfeit medicines cause cancer, diabetes, blood pressure, and kidney problems. Dialysis is increasingly common in Togo. As for textiles, if the product is poor quality, if they're made with lots of chemicals, they can badly affect the wearer's health by causing allergies.
Lomé is one of West Africa's main deep-water ports. 7 million tons of freight transit here each year, making the city one of the pillars of the sub-region's economy. But it is also a gateway for illegal imports of counterfeit products. We accompanied the customs officers on patrol, searching for pirate copies. Telling the real thing from a fake is not always easy. Counterfeiters have increasingly sophisticated methods for imitating the genuine article, and an untrained eye could not tell the difference. Customs controls are a key part of the war on contraband. We were allowed to film a routine check. Everything is scrutinized, from the size of the Pagnés to the patterns and labels. This time the goods were genuine. Unfortunately, this is an exception to the rule, as Mr. Akapo, a Lomé customs official, explained.
These days, just about everything that is imported is fake, whether we are talking about textiles, medicines, and even the main consumer goods. Everything, absolutely everything, is counterfeit. This phenomenon, as we see it today, is tied up with the development of Asian markets, especially the Chinese market.
As well as being a threat for public health, the counterfeit trade is also undermining legitimate industries working to create employment and growth in Africa. The major brands are bearing the brunt of the onslaught and have decided to fight back. Following the example of Nestlé in the agroalimentary sector, Velisco has signed several trade conventions with countries such as the Ivory Coast, the DRC, and Togo. The goal is to set up a strategy to fight the phenomenon and try to survive. In partnership with the AIPO, the African Intellectual Property Organization, brands are organizing training seminars to make magistrates and customs officials aware of the scale of the problem and provide them with knowledge they need to wage war on the smugglers. This public-private partnership should help maintain current employment levels in the legal sector, not to mention the revenue for the countries that can no longer levy import taxes.
L'impact économique pour l'État est énorme puisque
the economic impact for the state is enormous because counterfeit and fraud go hand in hand, and that means lost fiscal revenues on a daily basis. There are other, no less serious consequences, namely in terms of employment, simply because many local businesses can't compete on an uneven playing field and have had to close. That means layoffs and unemployment. Then there's the enterprise creation side of things that suffers because investors are not reassured by the general lawlessness of it all. So you see, the counterfeit trade has enormous consequences for Africa.
According to AIPO figures, depending on the sector in question, 30% to 80% of products on sale could be counterfeit. Velisco affirms that counterfeit goods have led to important losses over the past 5 years. Under Togolese law, counterfeiters can face fines of up to $10,500 and 6 months in prison. These sanctions don't seem to be harsh enough to dissuade the counterfeiters. However, in the eyes of the law, There is no distinction between the counterfeiter and the client, who both face the same penalties. Many African countries have decided to take a tougher stance when dealing with the problem.
Let's get back to the final part of Anne Grosfilet's interview this week. She explains to our journalists what are the threats weighing on African fabrics and how the continent's craftsmanship can succeed in finding a way to get around them.
What are the threats facing African handicraft today?
Today, there's a big problem in the traceability or in the organization of the cotton sector. At the start of this craft, the cotton is cultivated locally. The woman spins it, the man weaves it, and then there will be the use of industrial threads.
Puis ensuite, il va y avoir l'utilisation de fils industriels. Au moment des indépendances, donc autour des années 1960.
At the time of independence, so around the 60s, most cotton-producing countries, especially in the Sahelian zone, set up industrial cotton processing units. Ginning, spinning and weaving units, which meant that the artisans, the weavers, were able to work with very fine thread, which allows for finer and stronger weaves, but locally and with a true traceability. In the same way, the dyers also work with an unbleached fabric produced locally.
Les teinturières aussi travaillent un écru produit localement. Malheureusement,
unfortunately, over time there was a competition from imported products which jeopardized this local consumption and production. With the devaluation of the CFA franc in 1994, cotton-producing states were finally encouraged to export their cotton in its raw state, which earned them twice as much as before, and they neglected their industrial park. With the opening of borders in 2004 by the World Trade Organization, Asia arrives, and by Asia I mean China, Pakistan and India arrive with extremely competitive products, a thread with very good value for money, with basin to dye, for example, for the dyers, which is very affordable and which allows a lot of women to become dyers and to have a small but attractive additional income. But there's no longer any traceability, since we don't know where this thread comes from, where that cotton comes from. It could be African cotton or Uzbek cotton. There is also the problem in terms of quality. Since one buys it at markets, it's bought wholesale by wholesalers, and then one buys a few skeins and we no longer have the label. So from one purchase to the next, we can no longer guarantee the same quality of thread. And above all, there is no traceability. Consequently, today the problem for artisans is that they need to develop industries upstream, but they do not have the possibility to do this. So it must be private investors or the state that has to become aware of the issues and help to reorganize this. The dramatic side is that we are in a phase of deindustrialization, not in a phase of underdevelopment. All these things were put in place at the time of independence, but they fell into disuse and the factories have closed. This is quite sad when you see all this know-how, all this potential, which in fact is only asking for the raw material to work.
Much is said about the counterfeiting problem. Is it really a serious threat?
Well,
it is a threat for the African printing industries of printed loincloths, but it is also a threat for the artisans, because today there are a lot of Asian products that imitate both, for example, artisanal dyeing, but also raffia, for example, traditional fabrics. So these are loincloths with patterns that mean something, that refer to cultural references, and that's why people like them.
À des référents culturels, et c'est pour ça qu'ils plaisent. Ils sont d'un coût très abordable.
And they're very affordable. Therefore, indeed, people buy them because they recognize patterns that refer to things they know. They have meaning for them.
À des références qu'ils connaissent, qui ont du sens pour eux.
But economically, there's no impact for the craftsmen or for the local industrialists.
Ou pour les industriels locaux.
Ces dernières années, il y a eu une relève.
In recent years, African designers have, in a way, supported artisans by taking them under their wing. Do you have any advice to give to these artisans based on your own experience? What can they do to develop their expertise?
Alors effectivement, aujourd'hui, je pense que ce sont les créateurs de mode.
Indeed, I think that today it is fashion designers who support African craftsmanship the most. To support, what does that mean? It means showcasing in their collections and also ensuring a future by contextualizing them.
Concrètement, ça veut dire sortir les tissus de leur contexte.
Concretely, this means taking fabrics out of their context and therefore their nature of their traditional uses, but keeping them in the same degree of excellence by showcasing really very beautiful outfits and not trying to trivialize them in a day-to-day commonplace way.
Quotidien, trivial, j'ai envie de dire. The
other aspect is also sometimes not to touch the sacred fabrics, to keep them but to explore the skill and to say to these artisans with this complexity, I don't know, of technique rules, say, of stitching, of associations of heather yarns, of specific openwork patterns, of weaving chains. Can we create new weaves together for which I would have exclusivity? Thus, they no longer bring the artisans into something that is a reproduction of ancestral, traditional patterns, but they lead them to become creators themselves.
Ils amènent les artisans à devenir eux-mêmes des créateurs, c'est-à-dire utiliser cet héritage.
In other words, to use this ancient heritage and open it up to the future. And this, of course, appeals to African designers and African people who buy these things that have meaning, that are made by hand, that really have a human reach, but they also appeal to fashion designers all over the world.
Elles séduisent aussi les créateurs de mode du monde entier. J'ai par exemple travaillé avec la maison.
For example, I worked with the House of Christian Dior, which is now adhering to this process of cultural appreciation. They did it with the wax technique. They also did it by promoting the handiwork of fabrics.
Ils l'ont fait aussi en valorisant
from cotton and wool dyed with henna in the Fès region.
Dans la région de Fès. Donc les artisans aujourd'hui doivent être
Artisans today must therefore be prepared to explore, perhaps keep their fabrics sacred, and on the other hand, to carry on their traditions by being able to create other fabrics with the same excellent expertise, to open up to other markets and to show and secure a future, and even above all, to want to teach and attract the young generation to open up to apprenticeships, to discover and perpetuate these unique skills.
Pour découvrir et perpétuer ces savoir-faire uniques.
You were watching Initiative Africa. Well, that's it for today. If you want to catch the show again, tune in on our social media channels and feel free to share, like and comment using the hashtag Initiative Africa TV show. And also, you can follow us on our Twitter account @Africa Shows. And we're back again next week, same time, same channel with Business Africa, your appointment with the African economy. Until next week, keep safe and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.